Welcome to the OFX podcast. I'm Dave Claxton. Along with me, as always, is Spartan Pro. Still, yes, probably. We think. Who knows? Whatever. And our compact queen of quickness, Bethany McChesney. Hello, Beth.
Hello. Happy long weekend.
Yes, it's been a very good long weekend so far. It's been really good, and there's still time left. So we jump right on with what everybody's talking about. The biggest thing going on right now is Hildervat. And I guess it's not going on anymore. It's done. So for anyone who doesn't know, why don't you at least just quickly tell them what Hildervat was or is?
Yeah, so Hildervat was a race on the beach in Florida, and they brought in 6 big name pros, and they had a really interesting elimination type race weekend set up where we had 6 pros, 6 women, 6 men, and then the first race eliminated 2 people. So then the next race was 4 people, and then it brought them down to the next day. So Sunday, which was this morning, where it was a head-to-head race with 2 people. And then we finished off the weekend with a team relay, which was kind of a fun thing to watch, where we had teams of 4 that relayed the same course again. So the whole weekend was the same course. And so the race itself was a 3-loop of the same 1-mile course. So a 3-mile course, and they completed the same obstacles on each loop.
Okay, so I guess the first thing is, who did we have? Who was there? Who were the big names? Because there were 6 men, 6 women.
Yeah, so on the women's side, we had So we had Rebecca Hammond, Lindsay Webster, Alex Walker, who replaced Corinna Coffin at the last minute as a replacement as of last weekend. Nicole Miracle, Faye Stenning, and Lauren Weeks. And then on the men's side, we had VJ Jones, Ryan Atkins, Ryan Kempson, Ryan Woods, Robert Killian, and then Mr. Omar, who was the local competitor in that heat.
I think Omar got put into that, or got asked to do that, probably because I believe in the beginning, Aaron Newell was one of the people that was actually asked to do it too. And obviously Aaron's had some surgery and some stuff going on, and would not have been ready. Okay, so round 1, all 6 go out. And I like, it was good. So the women started off, all 6 go out. And how did you find the obstacles? Do you think the obstacles were up to par? Like, I mean, how did you find the course even?
So I found that the obstacles themselves, I was expecting a little bit more difficulty with the obstacles. So we had 3 rigs in the main loop, and the bucket carry, basically a rope climb, some cargo nets. And I was just expecting, and then there was supposed to be a axe throw. And then the night before at the athlete briefing, the athletes voted it out. So anyways, that was out of it too. So I was kind of expecting a little bit more difficult obstacles. They were still great because they were still the kind of obstacles in a way that rewarded athleticism. They were still failable, but at the same time, they weren't obstacles that people who are very obstacle proficient, like we had most of those 6 people in the men and the women's side would ever fail. And then they were just doing them so many times. So they became very, very efficient at them. And then the bucket carry was, and again, everybody always says the bucket carry is too short or too long, but it was quite short. And the women's bucket was about 30 pounds and the men's bucket was about 50 pounds. So it really wasn't a struggle for them. It was basically just, again, to break things up. There was a tiny crawl, which again was just to break up their stride. But they essentially did a grouping of all the rigs, ran all the way down the beach, carried the bucket, ran all the way back. So as far as the course is concerned, it wasn't a really, really exciting course. And again, you're basically on the beach. So the sand does become an obstacle in itself. And then we saw also how especially in the second race, when it was kind of prime beach time, the beach got flooded with beachgoers. So there was a lot of maneuvering around people's beach towels and everything else. So yeah, that's kind of what the course looked like. It was really unique.
So in the first round, and I don't know if you got a chance or if anybody else got a chance, but Jack Bauer had a pick 'em poll to see how you would do. And to start, so I mean, we had two people eliminated. So in the women, in the first round, we had Nicole come across first. We had Becca come across second, Lindsay in third, and then the fourth was
Alex Walker.
And actually, Alex Walker, I believe, passed Faye standing on the final rig where Faye really struggled on that rig. And you could tell that Faye's still very fast, still running. I mean, anyone who's seen DecaFit recently realized that Faye can still move and is still super fit. But her obstacle game has definitely dropped off a bit, and that cost her. For the men, we had VJ come across first then. Was it not? BJ, then I believe Atkins, then Kempson.
Yeah, I think so.
BJ, Atkins, Kempson, and Woods.
Yeah.
But those four came across, and Omar and Killian. And again, I don't think any surprise there. Omar gave himself a great effort, but you know what? I think was kind of a last minute sub and not a surprise. And Killian's not top form right now.
Right.
Yeah. So then we go to round 2. And this is when all the sunbathers came out.
Yeah. And it was only a few hours later. So it wasn't a massive amount of recovery time either between the two races.
So did you think that would play into it more? Did you think that would be a big deal?
I think it played a lot into the first race because I found once people got a bit of a lead, they really just kind of hit cruise control and just kind of finished the race, held their position. So there wasn't a whole lot of drama except for the situation with Faye and Alex. So Nicole and Rebecca and Lindsay kind of found their positions and then just kind of hit cruise control. And so they did have to strategize in that way because there wasn't a lot of time.
Yeah, I agree. Everybody just kind of parked it. This is where we are. Yeah. This is what's going to happen, and away we go. So for round 2, though, a little more competitive because only 4 people, only 2 people go on. For the women, they went out strong. And actually, you know what? Let's do the men's first because the women's was actually more interesting in a way. So the men went out. Again, VJ took them out fast, really, really fast. And Kempson right alongside with them. Then Ryan and Woodsy behind. Woodsy, I thought on the whole thing, I thought maybe, I don't know if the sun got to him, but he didn't look his best. He just, great competition, but he looked a step behind. They went out fast, and I think actually I know VJ's plan was to do that and go hot as long as he could and see if people could keep up. But I think he might have burned out Kempson in the process of doing that. And
and like Kempson basically had to see if he could outrun Atkins in order to try to get that second place. So I think when you're talking about a short course, VJ is going to take it out hot, and your only chance is really just to try to hang on his back. So I think that was Ryan Kempson's plan all along.
Yeah, and it ended up that Atkins did pass him on the second or third lap.
Yeah,
and VJ and Ryan went on to the end, and Kempson and Woodsy both drop off in the team there. So for the women, you want to say what happened with the women? Because that was kind of crazy.
Yeah, so much drama in the women. So Nicole took it out. Rebecca went with her. And it was a pretty close race. Rebecca was just a bit behind Nicole, and they were coming up into the third lap. And so Nicole and Rebecca had gapped Lindsay by a fair amount, and they had basically hit that cruise control button also to just save themselves, because they had gapped Lindsay by probably 90 seconds to 2 minutes. And then Nicole was on one of the few last rigs before the final rig, and she came off just in a really funny way, and her knee twisted in, she hit the ground, and not within a few seconds, she said, "I'm not finishing the race." And she tried to stand up, kind of wobbled to the side, and that was it. Rebecca passed her. Kind of seeing what happened, she actually failed that rig, which I think maybe she saw what happened and got a little bit thrown. Went back, redid the rig, and so it ended up being Rebecca finished first, Lindsay finished second, but definitely not in the way that you want to finish first and second.
No, and when you say she came off that rig, she didn't fall off the rig. She cruised through the rig, hit the bell, and dismounted. just all as she had planned.
And it looked like she hit it. It looked at first like she maybe hit the standard funny and maybe hit the bottom of it funny, but it was just kind of a landing where it's just one of these really fluke situations where her knee kind of buckled and she went to the ground, and it could happen to anybody. So
yeah, and you said you thought maybe she hit the standard at first, but as soon as you heard the knee thing, you called it. You said like, oh, that's a torn ACL.
ACL, yeah, and just because she said it so fast, I'm not finishing the race because with ACL tears, it's such an audible sound. You hear it and you hear that loud snap, and it's so obvious that something bad has happened. And then it's just this instant instability. And you saw her try to stand up and walk, and it was like she kind of like fumbled around. It's almost as if the bottom portion of your leg is not attached to the top. That's kind of how it feels. Because when you do a test to see if your ACL is you actually slide the bottom part of your leg, and you have so much laxity. So it's kind of a gross thing that so when you try to stand up on it, it's that same feeling. It's almost like the top is not attached to the bottom. So she stood up and then went right back down to the ground. So when I saw that, and then when I heard her comment, I was like, she knew, and she probably heard it. Like it's such an obvious sound when you hear it snap.
And the worst part was, and I mean, I think it's pretty safe to say, she was dominant. Like she was running away with this. And when you can run away from Becca Hammond and Lindsay Webster, that's next level shit. Like I was,
yeah.
What's that?
Just comfortable.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like I had picked her to win. But I didn't expect that she would just cruise away with it. She was in such good form, such good shape. Yeah, and now it just looks like it went from going to be the year of Nicole to sadly not.
Yeah, so quite likely she'll need surgery to repair the ACL. I don't know how she wouldn't need surgery, so she'll have to repair the ACL, and then the rehab will go after that. So,
as a warrior, though, she came back the next day to cheer people on.
Yeah, and I think I saw Ryan Woods giving her a piggyback ride, plopped her down on a chair at one of the obstacles.
That's awesome. So essentially by default, Rebecca, who was second and would have went on, and Lindsay got into the finals to go on for the women. So then they went the next day. They didn't do that the same day, and this is where kind of recovery as well came into play. And I had actually picked Atkins to win because I've learned not to bet against him. Even though in my head, I thought that this is a short course. This is not his specialty. There's no mountains. There's no, descents and ascending, and it does not favor him still. Not, after what he did in Jacksonville that one year, I just won't bet against him.
Yeah.
Even though the logical choice was VJ. So VJ and Ryan come out of the women went first, but we'll start with men anyway. So VJ and Ryan out of the gate. Again, VJ went out very hot. Is a great strategy for him. And Ryan, I found for the first bit anyway, seemed like he was playing a strategy that he would like to play and just kind of drafted. And I think I think it was Will Hicks who actually uttered the phrase the Hilderdraft. And I thought that's definitely the word of the day, the Hilderdraft. Anyway, and it looked like he was doing exactly what he wanted to do, but kind of came apart that for him,
Yeah, so we kind of saw after the first lap, there was about a 10 to 15 second gap. And I think most people kind of thought, this is kind of Ryan playing his strategy. This is kind of how Ryan works. He kind of sits back a little bit and sees how things play out, because Ryan obviously is much more of an endurance guy. But then the second lap, VJ doubled that gap, and he was about 45 seconds ahead after that second loop. And then he just continued to run away with it after that. And I think after the second loop, it was pretty solidified that I don't think you can make up a 45-second gap in a 1 mile loop, barring any massive tragedy or a beachgoer jumping in front or something.
And I think VJ, VJ actually, I think he beat him by of like 40 seconds. But in the end, like once VJ passed the second last rig and there was just that little few obstacles left, he backed way off and just cruised it in. So, I mean, it would definitely look like it was probably going to be more than a minute. And then so some people are talking about this, and I didn't think, but a friend brought it up afterwards. VJ essentially said, he felt like he broke Atkins, like you know, and two, he can argue that like he played his strategy, and Atkins dropped off. I didn't think VJ was being cocky about it. I thought he was just saying, and I actually thought later in the interview he gave Atkins his due and said, how do you break that guy? He's a robot and all this stuff, like he's a machine. So I didn't get a big deal of it, but I know that VJ is a little confident, maybe bordering on cocky. I thought it was okay. But did you hear that, or what do you think about that?
So did he say that in his finish line interview?
No, he wasn't even getting interviewed yet. He had just sat down, and he's like, I think I broke him. Like not, yeah, yeah. And then Matt Davis overheard it and flashed to VJ, and he's like, oh, can you say that again? He goes, well, he goes, either he mentally quit or I broke him, but how do you break a guy like that? He's a robot. And like, so, I mean, I don't know. I didn't think it was that bad, but I just thought I'd bring it up so you people can decide if you thought it was bad. But
Oh, no, I didn't hear that. No, it's interesting. Like VJ is probably someone who's also like he's so young in the sport as well, and he's coming up and he's kind of hit that point where he's probably beaten someone who he's massively looked up to for a long time. And in some ways he's probably a little bit stunned because he's probably been thinking about this race and thinking, how do I break Atkins?
yeah.
So, and that's probably been in his mind. And he probably just was like, I found the one way to break him. I run as hard as I can, as long as I can, and hopefully gap him as far as I can so that he can't catch up to me later. And that's what he said, what his strategy was the day before.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, that was a smart strategy because he wouldn't want to hang back with Atkins and run Atkins' pace and then try to outkick him at the end. I mean, that would be not wise at all. So I thought it was a good strategy. And you know what? He kind of did break him. He dropped him, right? He did what he needed to do. So I got no issues with it. Love Atkins, love VJ, good stuff. And then so the women, we got Lindsay and we got Rebecca, and they went off, and I guess it did look pretty much like Becca's race from the start. Once I hit the first rig, I think Lindsay had a couple. I don't think she fell off, but she had some issues on the first rig, and from that point, it was done.
Lindsay always seemed to have an extra backswing on all of the things, all of the rigs, and Becca was just so fluid through them, like one backswing, go, one go. So and in the end, in such a short race, all of those seconds add up. And then when it also comes down to the run portion, and we're talking about a flat 5K, that's definitely playing again more towards Rebecca's strengths, being a collegiate track runner, and then Lindsay definitely saying she does not enjoy flat running as much as technical running. And again, it just played all into Rebecca's strength. So, and then again, Lindsay has also been in Canada, we're in complete lockdown. She said a few times how she hasn't had a chance to really practice on obstacles. Climbing gyms have been closed. Even Craig's have been closed. You're not even doing outdoor rock climbing. And she just didn't really have that fluidity through the obstacles. And in the end, her obstacle game kind of suffered. And then her running was a little bit off par, just being on that flat and fast surface. So Rebecca definitely ran away with it.
All right. So I'm going to call a little bit of shenanigans on Lindsay here. We love Lindsay. She's amazing. She's like the world's nicest person.
Yeah. Always smiling.
Always smiling. Class act to the end. However, Lindsay, you and Ryan have a platinum rig thing set up in your home. You can practice
That's
obstacles
true.
there.
Yeah.
There is no excuse for that. That said, I mean, it's not the same as having a rig, a classic rig where you can get more swing in it. It is just apparatus where you can, and her grip strength was fine. It was not an issue with grip.
Right.
It was an issue with technique going through the obstacles.
Yeah.
Yeah. And definitely seemed like momentum was a big thing she struggled with. No backswing, and was not able to maintain her momentum.
Yeah.
And I was worried about this. So I guess finals. We had like the final score, first overall, Becca, Lindsay. Who was next after that was.
Well, then I guess you'd say Alex.
No, yeah. Alex, then technically Nicole, and then
Nicole and then Faye and then Lauren.
Well, actually, Lauren ended up beating Faye.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, because Faye never finished that last rig. She never got through it.
Oh, okay.
That toilet paper roll rig, which actually, if you haven't seen it, it's the same kind of rig they have set up for Bone Frog. I believe it's called Get a Grip, and it's essentially just handles with spinning handle. If you look like a T-Rex handhold that you've worked out with, just picture that handle spinning, and that's what you got in a rig of those. So Faye actually was at the bottom on that one. And then for the men, VJ, Ryan, Kempston, Woods, Killian, and Omar. Mm-hmm. So that was it. Now, I kind of was afraid of this when I first saw this setup. I thought the first 2 rounds would be okay. And then I was worried on the third round with just 2 people on a 5K course. If it got spread out, it would be a little anticlimactic. And it really was.
Yeah. And when I was watching the women's race, all I was thinking was this would have been such a good race if it was Nicole. And again, it was more that my heart was broken for her because that's just such an awful situation to be in, but it just would have been such a different race if it was Nicole and Rebecca. And in the end, it was definitely Rebecca ran away with it. So it was, and right from the beginning, pretty much there was a gap. So it was not really an exciting race in that way.
Yeah. And that was the thing. I thought, maybe I'll go back and say what because yes, Nicole being in it would have made it a better race, but there was other ways that I would have changed it anyway. And I'm going to just say what I thought would have been better. But so after that, they went to a relay. So the people who finished on the bottom were able to pick teams. They picked 3 relay teams, and they all went together, and they shortened the course, took out the long run portion, the crawl, and the bucket carry, and just had essentially the main obstacle portion. So they each 4-person team, each member had to do a lap, and who the teams were really doesn't matter. Even who won doesn't really matter. They really put in the axe throw again. And so actually, and I liked this. This is why I wanted to bring this up. I liked the axe throw in it because, which normally I hate that obstacle. There's a stupid obstacle, but I liked the penalty for it.
I did too, actually. Yeah, this was much more than I like the spear throw penalty.
Yeah. So you go ahead, fire away.
Yeah. So the axe throw, it's not like the axe has to stick into something. Mm-hmm. It has to hit a target, and any portion of the target, any part of the spear, it has to hit the target, which is much easier than a spear sticking and maybe the end falls, maybe the end doesn't. It's very different. But then you basically then run the same way, but then you're either running on a straight lane or you're running in a lane where you hop over 4 walls.
4 walls, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, it's going to slow you down. Absolutely. But it's not going to take like a minute and a half longer.
No.
Where it throws you completely out of the race, like doing 30 burpees.
And for an obstacle like that, I thought that was such an appropriate penalty.
I agree. Yeah.
It was great. I was like, probably the best takeaway from this race was that was cool. That's the kind of penalty to put in the spear throw, and I hate, for lack of a better word, these gimmicky kind of throwing thing obstacles.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be race changing obstacles. Put in a penalty like that.
Right. Yeah.
But I thought that was really cool, and I liked it. And that race, the team race, and again, it didn't matter who won. It didn't matter who came over. It was fun to watch.
Yes.
Because there was a lot of action. It was fast. It was condensed. It was very obstacle dense. There wasn't like a minute and a half of just straight running through the sand. Things were constantly happening. Mm. And it made me think, and so now I'll go back. It made me think how good both of those finals still would have been, and even the first rounds, if they were 1 lap of those courses. If they had just 1 lap and went straight out, and how hard they would have to go. I don't know that it would have changed who finished where, but it would have been way more exciting. Like if you think how they finished the first lap compared to how they would finish the third lap, I think way better.
Yeah, probably in this case with who was in the final would not have changed the outcome. But again, it definitely changes the energy systems you're using, and you're definitely favoring the obstacle specialists. Yeah. So you cannot make up any time being a good runner.
No, well, I mean, I don't mean cut it down to the completely small loop that they did for the team one. But if they regular loop, but 1 lap instead. That still would have been more exciting to watch. I mean, because you might have had 3-4 people on the second last rig all together. It would have been more entertaining. Would it have been a better race from the experience of the pros? I don't know. I'm more concerned about me watching it and enjoying it. So I think it would have been a better race. And that's why I keep going on short course racing. So much more fun to watch. And this thing at 5K was still too long. Too long. No good. They did put on a good show. They paid these guys well. They made some good money. Was it? I mean, you have the list of money here. So Becca Hammond, $5,500. VJ Jones, $5,000. Ryan Atkins, $2,500. Lindsay, $2,000. Alex Walker, $1,000. Ryan Kempson, $1,000. Faye Stenning, $750. Robert Killing, $750. Nicole, $500. Ryan Woods, $500. Omar, $250. And Lauren Weeks, $250. And one word about Omar, man on that team thing, he went out flying.
He did. He went out on a mission.
He did. He was out of that gate running like 100-meter dash speed and looked pretty good until he got a little stuck on an obstacle. I don't think he failed, but and I think he missed the axe too, and I think that's slowed him down. I was just glad to see him go. Just give it. Let it all happen.
That's the thing too with relays is you're running for your team and it's not just about you. So it's like you can find that extra level because you're doing this for somebody else too. Or your whole team for 3 other people.
Yeah. And it looked like, and just like OCRWC, it did look like the point where they had the most fun.
Oh, yeah. And Ryan Atkins said it too. He's like, I'm excited for the team relay because there's no pressure. And really, there isn't. Yes, the leading team did win some money, but at the same time, the pressure is definitely off. And it's not just about you. Like everybody else has to perform well too. So,
yeah. Another thing I liked in the interviews, and I mentioned this before, when they did the final interviews, and even when they're racing, you saw VJ wearing his virus provided shirt. You saw Atkins wearing his Riverbend CBD shirt. I liked that involves other sponsors in the company, and this is where I've complained Spartan needs to let the athletes get on the podium and wear their shirts, and you bring more sponsors into the sport. Mm-hmm. Like if I was running a big company, I'm not gonna sponsor an athlete or sponsor the sport if I can't get the advertising on the podium because your race needs to put their own logo on it. I just thought it was good. It was good to see.
Yeah, and it was interesting too because in the team event, so this is a Hildervat event, and so in the team relay, they all wore the CBD company, so Riverbend tank top. So again, Riverbend gets their name out there as well. So it's incentive for other companies to start putting money into these athletes and into the actual events if their name can actually be shown on the podiums and the athletes wearing them. So you kind of short the income into the sport if you're saying you can only wear your race name shirt on the podium and then these athletes too, they potentially could cut out some of their sponsorship money if they can't wear their sponsor shirts on the podium too.
Well, yeah. And I mean, like I was thinking, I went right to my head was like Subaru, Jeep, the new Ford Bronco, all of these off-road vehicles that go in with the whole, outdoors wilderness lifestyle that OCR predominantly is. I mean, if I was running one of those companies, I'd be completely interested in going to Atkins or VJ and going, hey, we'll throw some cash on you. You wear a Jeep shirt, you win the race, you wear it on the podium. We'll put you in a couple because, I mean, it doesn't even matter that the rest of the world wouldn't know who they are, but they see these guys doing this rugged stuff in the Jeep shirt, driving the Jeep to the woods. I mean,
yeah,
it just makes sense. But if you cut off their knees, they're not going to come.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So instead of smarten the fuck up and, let people wear the proper shirts on podiums and get sponsors. Yeah. It'll grow the sport.
And it also helps the athletes too, because it helps them to make a proper income so that they can keep doing their sport and making making money so that, they're not just relying on race winnings all the time.
Yeah. So do you think, and the way everything's gone this year and like people have pivoted a lot, do you think like the Spartan whole Spartan team motto and Spartan's kind of grip on OCR is maybe floundering a bit, because you have events like this that are saying, you know what, let's throw some money out there and get the big names to it. And they're willing to go. They're willing to do it. You've seen a lot of them doing the Savages, because Savage puts out a decent little prize. And then you see these guys throwing out good money. Do you think maybe people are going to, especially that have said finally to Spartan, like, like VJ and was it that said, we're not on your team, we're not taking your contract, let's, move on for there. Do you see more of that happening?
Yeah, I think 2019, so it was 2020 when those contracts came out for Spartan, when they started restricting the Spartan Pro team they basically gave the Spartan Pro team a list of sponsors that they could have. And I think that kind of threw a lot of them for a loop, because some of them were not, their primary sponsors weren't on that list. So in some ways it did really handcuff them. So they basically didn't sign these contracts with the Spartan Pro team. And I think that was probably the beginning of the big shift, with these athletes being part of the pro team and then to moving to be independent, to be more representing their own sponsors. And then that gives them the opportunity to shift to other races like Savage, who puts on amazing events. And I think that was probably in some ways a mistake in Spartan. Like we were saying, is this going to be where their dominance is no longer in the sport of OCR? Because now you're going to bring in races like Savage, which puts on an amazing event. And they're a lot of what the pros are saying too with Spartan racing is the obstacle innovation is lacking, and they miss that excitement in the races with the obstacles themselves. So now they might start to shift to, if they don't have to be contractually obligated to Spartan racing anymore, then they can shift to doing these other events that are a lot more exciting. And if their sponsors will pay them, if they're more interested in them being able to represent and wear their gear on podiums and everything, then they'll go try other things that are more exciting to them. So I think, I think what Spartan did that year was definitely a step in the wrong direction for them. And maybe in the end, that Spartan Pro team contract, if they're going to still enforce that, it might just fade away.
Yeah, it might. And that's what I say. Like, I mean, Virus Clothing is a new sponsor for VJ. He wore the shirt today, this weekend, and I'm sure they were much happier with, him being able to wear that shirt the whole time and get his pictures on the whole thing. And Riverbend CBD did great with their sponsorship there. I believe they put forth all the prize money, so that was great.
Yeah,
just showing they're really buying into the sport. So if you're into CBD, check them out. They're back in the sport. It's good stuff. Well, I don't know if it's good stuff. I don't use it, but I'm going to assume so.
Yeah. And then you saw, so Ryan and Lindsay were wearing their human t-shirts in the final events too, which again, that's a massive amount of publicity for their company as well.
So did you like the full format? Did you like the way they set it up, or do you think it would have been better as more concise, like I said?
So I like the distance of the event, because I think if you shorten it too much, you're just totally favoring the obstacle specialist. But I just kind of wish, because so as fans, we were watching basically the same race 3 times in a way. So same obstacles, same course, except for the team race, they threw the axe. So I just kind of wish they had somehow been able to change up the course, even just to change the obstacles. So the rigs. So it's sort of easy to switch around rigs. You change some rings, just change the grips or anything, because I think these athletes just became so proficient. Mm-hmm. Because each race they did each rig 3 times. So by the end, they've done it so many times, and they're allowed to practice on them, that they just get through them, and they get through them so quickly that it's not even an issue anymore. And I just think it would have made it that much more exciting if maybe there was some variance in even the rigs. So that was my only thing by the end of it, is I was like, yeah, okay, Rebecca's going to get through this rig the exact same way she's gotten through it the last 9 times she's gone through this rig. So that was my only thing, just change them up. Because when we were at North Americans for OCR, the Kempson rig was changed for each event, 3K, 15K the next day for the team relay. And it wasn't that difficult for them. So I was just expecting that the rigs would be changed up a little bit.
I would have loved to have seen that rig at this race. Like they did have the one Kempson design rig, which was good with the rope and everything, but they did it so many times. I would have loved to have put that Kempson rig, Underdog, I believe it was called.
Underdog, yeah.
From that would have been awesome because it did reward. It could have been done so many different ways, and you could take the chance to get through it really fast, or you could take your time and get through it safely. And that would have been a perfect rig. I wish I know he put a lot of thought into this other rig and it was a good rig. I just maybe wish he had brought both.
Yeah.
So with this and with VJ beating Ryan and, and even Becca beating Lindsay, is the time of the specialist finally on us? Is it time now where specializing works, where it has to happen? And I would think VJ pretty much is really the epitome of it because he keeps saying, yeah, I'll do these other races, but this is what I'm going to hit. He said himself, I'm focusing my whole year on OCRWC 3K. Yeah, I'll probably do the 15, but I don't really care. I want to be world champion for the 3K. Is it time where people are going to have to pick what they want to do, or they're going to get left behind trying to be masters of all?
Yeah, so I think this is one of those things where it's a natural progression of a sport where you have such a variety of events. And you look at sports like rock climbing and track, which OCR is in a way kind of a combo of them. And with rock climbing, you have speed climbing, you have sport climbing, and you have bouldering. And a good climber, you can do all 3. But if you're going to be really good at one, you just have to specialize in one. And as soon as people start specializing, you can't compete in that unless you specialize, because there's going to be people that are so good at that one element that unless you're focusing on it too, you're just not even close to them anymore. So, and same thing with track. You can be a good 800 meter runner and you're going to run a really fast 1500. But if you're not focusing on the 800, you're still never going to be able to be at the top in the 800. And I think this is what's happening now in the sport of OCR. So VJ might be one of the first really big names who's been very open and saying, I'm focusing on the 3K at OCR Worlds. And if I'm going to be a world champion, this is where it's going to be. And so then we see this weekend where we have a short course, and someone who's Ryan Atkins was not close to him even in the first lap. So it shows where because Ryan Atkins is someone who's so dominant in any race. He's never been beaten in a race over 8 hours. So that to him, that's his area. So then you're putting this 8 hour above guy against a short course guy. And you just saw where no matter what, it just wasn't even on Ryan's radar to even be with him within the first mile. So I think, and again, so if you're going to want to be really good at these short courses now, because we have guys specializing in it, you just have to kind of pick and choose. And that's not to say you can't be still competitive, but if you're going to be on a podium at a world championship, you do have to start to specialize. And that's just, I think, a natural progression in sport.
And it's going the other way too, as well, because, and you say that VJ is one of the big names doing it, but also, I mean, our good buddy Leon, he's definitely the same path. Yeah. But I was actually thinking Rhea Coble on the women's side for the longer distance. She seems like she's completely abandoned the whole pretty much anything less than an ultra.
Right. Yeah.
Not in her interest. She's shown it that she's dominant at that thing. She's going to train that distance, and unless you're going to specialize, you're not going to beat her.
Right.
You know,
I think too, you see people this is the hard part with OCR, is because a lot of OCR people, they love, you do them all. And we have these trifecta weekends too, where you just expect people to do all three. And you have guys like Ryan Atkins, who he can really excel in just about anything, but he is such an anomaly.
Yeah.
So people just kind of assume, well, he did it, but that's just not normal. Like, not, people normally can't just win a 24-hour race and then come out and podium in a 3K race. That's just not normal. Yeah. So most people kind of have to decide, am I going to be focusing on these longer events, or I'm going to focus on the shorter stuff, or be really obstacle proficient and focus on events like Savage and OCR Worlds.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Hunter's the same way. I think Hunter has figured this out as well, because before he was like, yeah, I'm going to come back to OCR and I'm going to win championships and I'm going to do this. But I think he's realized that his money is in High Rocks. That's where he belongs. That's where he is dominant. And if he comes back to the OCR, still trying to be dominant at High Rocks, it's not going to work. He's not going to be able to do it. So now he's decided, I'm going to stay in my lane a little bit. He still has this idea about the, 200-pound man marathon mark, but again, it's Hunter. But he's, like I said, he's learned that he cannot come back. He's not going to beat guys like Atkins at the longer distance. He's not going to beat VJ and guys like that at the short distance. He'll do good.
Yeah.
He'll be a top 5, top 10 for sure, but he's not going to be a dominant force. And that's not what's going to pay bills for him. He needs to be that dominant force. And I think he figured out, he might've been the first one to figure it out.
Yeah. And again, you find events like High Rocks for someone like Hunter, who that is it's a perfect event for him.
Yeah. And apparently
he can run fast and he can push heavy weight. So,
and apparently DecaFit for Rich Ryan, because he is just on fire. Oh
yeah, exactly.
I don't think when we talked to David McGee afterwards, we really didn't get enough time to talk about Rich Ryan and how freaking he has, and again, he's decided to focus on this.
Yeah.
And it's paid off. He set the mark for world record when he set the best time yet for the 5K and the mile. I mean, he is dialed in and he's continuing to down. I do know he's going to do some High Rocks too. I don't expect quite the same results from him in High Rocks.
Yeah, it is quite a different event still.
Yeah, it's not the distance. Again, he's going to do great on the run. But those are a lot bigger weights for him to move, and he's not really a big guy.
Right.
But he'll still do well. And I hope he stays in DECA. I hope him, Forrest Bogue, Jack Bauer, those guys are focused on it. And again, specialization, it's got to happen.
Yeah.
You're gonna get left behind. Fun runs. Let's all go do trifectas, do every distance, 24 hours, 2K. Same day, whatever. It'll be great.
Yeah. And that's to say, for most people, go ahead, do them all. But when we're talking about the people that are going to be podiuming at the top events, it's probably going to be people that have specialized.
So I want to touch on one more event that happened this weekend. All right. And I'm not going to get in super details because I actually have more of a concern. So High Rocks was in Austin, Texas, the same weekend. And maybe booking at the same time as Hildervat might have been a mistake because a lot of the big names were there. But the showing, the turnout looked really low. And whether it's accurate or not, I don't know. But I went through the finishing times, the results, and it looked like under 300 people. And I'm like,
yeah.
So I'm like, was that a blip? Is that, just because more people were interested in Hildervat this weekend? Is it because there's so much going on? Why do you think that would be?
Yeah, it's funny because I actually didn't realize, I think a lot of people in the obstacle racing, hybrid racing community, Hildervat was so on everybody's radar too. Hildervat wasn't a huge number either in the end. But I think it's also just right now because of Florida and Texas are open and there's just so much going on where if someone's going to have an event right now, it's there. So every weekend there's just so much happening and High Rocks is still really new. So you're still having to bring in new people every weekend. So if there's this other stuff all going on and they're kind of picking and choosing and they're like, I don't know what this High Rocks thing is yet. And maybe it was just too much all at one time with when the world kind of opened back up again. And with other big events going on in Florida, maybe it was just too much on one weekend.
Yeah, because people who see this right now, and people who have been, I don't want to say naysayers, but maybe critiqued High Rocks for two things especially. One, same race every race is exactly the same. I mean, we know it's not exactly the same, but the idea is the same race to race to race. There is no change, there is no variance. So some people essentially will say, well, once you've done one, they're all the same. Who cares? Unless you want to be super competitive. So therefore, it may not appeal to the masses as much. And again, not really having, like they do have a lighter weight category, but it's still pretty heavy. And maybe it's a bit intimidating to the average gym goer or the average person, as opposed to something like DECA, where it's like, as Yancey says, 99.9% of the population can get through it. So are these inherent flaws, or like I said, do you think it's just a blip?
So I don't know if the same thing all the time is necessarily a bad thing, because when it just depends on the community that you're trying to reach, because it's also like there's a massive amount of people that race marathons all the time, and it's always the exact same distance, and it's always on the road, and you're just kind of changing the scenery around the road. So I don't know if that necessarily is a flaw with High Rocks, because I also think in some ways that's also very appealing, because you know exactly what you're training for. All of the workout stations are in the exact same order. You're always doing the exact same thing. So in some ways that's really nice. So I don't know if that is necessarily a problem with High Rocks. The open weights are definitely very doable. And then there's also the relay. So if you're still kind of nervous about High Rocks, and it's a much there's much less pressure if you sign up with it in the team event too, where you can break up the workout stations. So I don't know if that's necessarily, if that would be the problem either. Yeah, the pro weights are definitely they're difficult, but again, it gives people something else to shoot for. So you work really hard, you kind of get through the open weights, and then you're like that, you can kind of set your goals to be able to do those pro weights. So in a way that also gives it longevity, because then people have something else to shoot for once they kind of feel like they've mastered the weights in the open division. So
yeah, and I think you're right. The marathon point's bang on. Like,
mm-hmm.
and the thing about a marathon is anybody can run a marathon outside their house. Like I could go run a marathon around my block or down the street or whatever. High Rocks, most people do not have all the gear to practice that at their house. So it makes the actual special event worthwhile. I agree. With the entry level, it's all fine. I think it's just a blip. I hope. I really do.
Well, and you have to realize too, a lot of people are still not comfortable traveling to big mass events.
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of it too. And people still can't. We still can't travel here north of the border. So that's also part of it.
Because if we could, we would have been at Course Extreme a couple weekends ago. Which happens,
right.
Happens still. And July 9th, Dead End will be going on same place. It'll be a good race all weekend long. Go there.
Yeah.
As long as we can get into Quebec, we'll be there. Yeah, again, High Rocks, the only thing, I still want to see them do a half High Rocks. I think that'd be great. I think it would open it up. And I think they get more people out of CrossFit gyms with that one. Because if they take away 8K running and that's only 4K or 2 miles or whatever the case may be, 3,200 meters, that'll get more of them in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I think that's all we need to go through today. And I think that Hildervat, I think it was a good thing. I was happy with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And all the athletes seem to have a really good time.
Yeah. Oh, one more, except for Nicole.
Okay. Yeah. No, I know. Yeah.
She was having a great time until that moment. And again, good coverage by Obstacle Racing Media. They did coverage as well, did the OCR report. And you check them both out because it was a very different feel from each one. take your pick.
Second day, we watched both. It was actually really funny. We'd had one on our phones and one on the TV, and it was really interesting.
We did the exact same thing this morning,
Yeah.
too. One there. There were definitely strong points to each one, so they're both worthwhile, and they're all great people. Check them out and support those guys. Obviously, OCR, our obstacle racing media, Matt B. Davis, been great for us. Check out his podcast, which of course you already have. And the OCR reports a bunch of different podcasts from World's Toughest Podcast, Will Hicks, Jason Dupree, and Anna Landry, OCR Talk, Mike Stefano and Caitlin doing obstacle running adventures. All great people, all great podcasts. Definitely worth checking it out. And yeah, that's it for us for today.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. Keep getting out there and crushing it and giving us something awesome to talk about.